Hi, I'm Carolia from the Yoga Lunchbox, and today I'm here with Hamish Kenworthy of Apollo Power Yoga Studio in Christchurch. So Hamish is New Zealand's only certified Baron Baptiste teacher. He's also New Zealand's only certified Budokon teacher right now, and he's leading a 200-hour Power Vinyasa yoga teacher training in Methven early next year. So welcome, Hamish.
Welcome. Nice to be there.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on to have a chat. You know, Baron Baptiste was one of the first yoga teachers I used him for home practice. I had one of his early books, so I'm really excited to talk to you and find out more about your training and where you've come from. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get into yoga?
I got into yoga fairly late in life. I'd played sports all the way through my life, but hadn't even considered yoga. Until my wife took a class at a studio up in Nelson when we were up there for a conference. And she really liked it, and she found out from them where she could practice in Christchurch. And then said to me, like kind of every day for the next year and a half or 2 years, you should try yoga, you should try yoga. And eventually I did. And that was a Bikram practice that we started with. And about 18 months into Bikram practice, I felt the calling to do something serious with it. And right at that time, one of the teachers that we had there, a very astute, intuitive woman, she lent me a copy of Journey into Power by Baron Baptiste. And it just so happened that he was going to be doing a training about an hour south of Sydney about 2 months after that. And so I received encouragement from my wife Margot, who helps me run Apollo Power Yoga. We're co-owners of it. And so I went and did a training in Power Vinyasa without ever having done a down dog in a class or anything like that. So it was a hard physical week.
Wow.
But a transformative week for me. I've never looked back.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story. That was the book that I had, actually, Journey into Power. And it is, you're right, it's an amazing book. So obviously it inspired you a lot to go and train with Baron Baptiste just from reading his book.
And it'll be the foundational text for this 200-hour teacher training that we're going to be doing.
Oh, wow. Cool. So what was it like training with Baron Baptiste?
A really great experience. When you stand next to Baron, he's not a tall man.
Yeah.
When you see Baron from a distance, he just fills space, enormous energy about him. He has an aura, in this country we might call it mana, and his investment in every one of the students that he's trained is incredible. I've done a number of trainings with him now, and he works with some big groups, and he listens and he connects in, and he gives everybody on his training a powerful experience. He shows an interest in everybody, and he sees potential in everybody, and he seeks to give each individual the tools that they need to untap that potential. And I found him truly inspiring.
So let's talk a little bit more about the definition, I guess, of the yoga that you're delivering through your trainings, of course, with Baron Baptiste. So it's power yoga and it's power vinyasa yoga specifically. And I want to talk about both of those words because sometimes there's confusion about what power means in relationship to yoga and what vinyasa is. So let's talk about power. When you talk about power in relationship to yoga, what does that mean?
Power is capable of being interpreted in a number of different ways. And sometimes it's about physical strength. Sometimes it's in terms of your ability to influence or control others. But the way in which I teach power through our studio is in accordance with the definition that Aristotle gave to power, which is the ability to be and to let be. And so we teach people that they can be themselves, they don't need to perform, they don't need to try and subscribe to anyone else's notion of what is right or wrong. They can be, and they can give other people the same freedom. And through that, we all grow together.
I love that definition. Can you give it to us one more time? So Aristotle, what was the quote?
The ability to be and to let be.
Which is almost paradoxically completely opposite to how we would define power in a Western context, like in a modern world context.
That's right, Carolia. It's almost the complete obverse of that other definition that I suggested, the ability to control and influence others.
Yeah.
In an Aristotelian context, and one that really appeals to me, it's the obverse. It's just, living and letting live.
Yeah, and I can so see how a yoga practice brings that forth,
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about vinyasa. So vinyasa, when you break down the components of vinyasa, and I went and wrote this down so I had it in my head. So V means in a special way, and nyasa means to place. So the actual Sanskrit definition means to place in a special way, but the word itself in context of yoga means so much more than that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. A word can be defined for a place or a time, and that place or time might be very different from centuries or millennia later. And so what's understood in the first time isn't necessarily appreciated in the later time. And also a strict breakdown of a word doesn't necessarily convey the full weight or meaning of the word. Mm-hmm. So for me, vinyasa connotes a sense of flow. It connotes in the physical practice, the fluid, smooth morphing of one form of the body into another. Just very natural, very organic, very sinuous, very snake-like, and very powerful. It also means something more than that. It means a way of being in congruence with life. I recently wrote an item for an email, our newsletter that we do each month through our studio. And in that I referred to some studies done by Dr. Adam Fraser, an Australian educationist and teacher and speaker on leadership and what else does he speak on? That's probably enough to mention in relation to him, but he describes a graph which plots challenge on one axis and resistance on the other. And he says there's 4 quadrants. And a quadrant of high resistance and low challenge is called grind. A quadrant of low resistance and low challenge is called ease. A quadrant of high resistance and high challenge is called effort. And a quadrant of high challenge but low resistance he calls flow. And we can find that in our lives. We can find that sort of vinyasa as a way of being, taking on life in a big way, but removing the rocks of resistance so that we can just flow and take on challenges, particularly where the resistance is self-imposed. Doubt, negativity, I'm not good enough, that success belongs to someone else, it doesn't belong to me.
I love that definition because, I mean, we can't control the challenges that we face, but we can always control the amount of resistance that we bring to those challenges, can't we?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is if we're in high challenge, we can go low resistance and all of a sudden we're in this state of flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's relaxing with things that are and taking responsibility for what we can change, what we can deal in our life, but not stressing what we can't. And you're quite right, Carolia, that challenges arise without us without us meaning them to, without us intending them to. We don't volunteer for all the challenges in our life, but if we've got some meditation, if we've got some breath, if we've got some congruence with nature, then we can meet those challenges with equanimity.
It sounds to me like you draw on a wide variety of influences in the way that you teach yoga. Because you're talking about Baron Baptiste, etc. You're talking about some of the yogic texts, but you're also talking about researchers and educators or Aristotle, Western thought, and you're linking all of these things to yogic terms in the way that you teach yoga.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite eclectic, but for me, a truth is a truth, and if it resonates with me. And has meaning for me, then I want to share that. And it doesn't need to come from a specific tradition. But you can almost certainly find tie-ins between different strands, between different cultures, between different traditions of thought. And so Greek philosophy and the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita or the Yoga Sutras, there's a lot that's in common. Mm-hmm. If you take the Ten Commandments from the Bible and Buddha's Noble Truths and compare it with the Quran, or you look at the yamas and the niyamas, there's a lot of commonality between those principles. Mm.
Do you think that the fact you came to yoga later in life has given you an advantage because you're drawing on, a deeper sense of knowledge of different thought streams as such?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. One of the things that really gripped me with yoga was that the more I practiced, the more I got into my breath, mm-hmm. and the more I started to realize who I might be and who I was being. Mm. I started out my working life as a lawyer, and I worked as a litigation partner in a local firm here in Christchurch. And when you're in the process of, in my case, I was in the process of giving advice to people, and people were accepting my advice, and it was my role to express opinions to courts, and a certain arrogance went with that. Mm. And I started to play the role of being a lawyer rather than being Hamish, who happened to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And when my wife and I started a family, I had my hand up to stay at home and be the one of the two of us who would stay home with our children. And part of that was that I didn't like who I'd been being as a lawyer. I enjoyed the job, I was quite successful at the job, but I didn't like who I was being. Mm-hmm. So there was a certain running away on my part from a way of being. But it wasn't until about another 8 years later that I got into a yoga room and started to actually breathe and come into a kind of a meditative flow that I started to get greater insight into who I might be. Mm-hmm. And then Baron's first training, stripped away a few more layers of the onion.
I bet he did. Cleared
away a few demons. And I'm a different person now from the way that I was.
Yeah.
The way I show up now is quite different from the way that I was. And, I'm still,
refining.
Well, yeah, I wasn't even trying to suggest that I was even close to being what I would like to be, what I'd hope to be in terms of compassion and connection and love. But I'm a better person now than I was, certainly.
And now you're turning around and sort of paying it forward as such. You're about to start running a 200-hour teacher training. It's called Step Into Your Power, and it starts in January. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We're running it in 2 8-day intensives. The first one, mid-January, runs for 8 days in Methven, which is about an hour south of Christchurch, and take people out of the city, out of their lives, and really immerse them. We will do long days. It'll be physically challenging, it'll be emotionally challenging, but it will be a real immersion in yoga practice and yoga philosophy, in meditation and breathing, in learning a practice and how you can bring that practice onto the mat. And then we do a second stage in mid-April, and we're running that in Maruia Hot Springs. We know some people who are buying the Maruia Hot Springs Resort, and we'll run it up there. They've got a bit of a yoga background, and awesome. One of them is a yoga teacher, so it's a nice fit to work with them. And so 2 8-day intensives, plus some non-contact work, some essay work, and recording yourself doing some teaching so that we can see you manifesting what's been learned during the course of the program. Mm-hmm. We're offering the first stage. If you just want to do an immersion, if you just want to come along and get deep into practice in meditation and philosophy for an 8-day period, you can do the first part standalone. Mm-hmm. If you want the 200-hour qualification, which is a Yoga Alliance qualification, then you'll need to do both, plus complete the non-contact work to the requisite standard.
Awesome. Now, one final thing I want to ask you about, Hamish, because you are the first certified Budokon teacher in New Zealand, is that right?
I believe I was the first New Zealander to complete their qualification. I haven't quite caught up. I'm not sure whether there's others who have joined me with one of Cameron Shane's certificates. But yeah, I did that earlier this year, and it was a great.
So did you go study
fun.
with Cameron himself?
The last 2 years, when he's come south for Wanderlust, we've hosted workshops with him at our studio here in Christchurch, and he stayed with us at our house. And so we've kind of gotten to know Cameron, live wire that he is.
He's crazy, man. He's crazy awesome, that guy.
And the second time that he came down, he had Melaine, his new partner, with him, and so we got to know her a bit too, and she's lovely.
Yeah.
Just after he had run the workshops that he was running with us in January this year, he said, look, I'm going to be doing this 50-hour teacher training through the Power Living Studios in Sydney, and we'd love to have you along. I said I would love to come along, and so I enrolled for that training and went over, and about 20-odd of us did the training in Sydney. He had done one in Auckland shortly before that, but that hadn't worked out for me to be a part of that, so I went over to Sydney and trained with him there, and it was a great experience.
So what was your major takeaway from the Budokon training? Because it is vinyasa. There's a lot of flow. Like, he's big on the way you transition from one thing to another and where you draw your power from. So I imagine it goes quite nicely with what you learned from Baron. Yeah,
it's interesting. It's a slightly more sophisticated transition-based practice. Well, not slightly. It is a transition-based practice. And as Cameron says, from a martial arts background, if you stop moving, you get feedback in the form of a kick to the head. So you got to keep moving. And it's not about coming into Warrior One and holding it. It's about, well, we're going to flow. We're going to be in this Warrior Two-like position for an instant en route to something else. But we're not going to rush the process. We're going to move slowly, integrated strength, move from our core outwards, and it's a powerful practice. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. I love the way that Cameron teaches and what he does with, the Budokon.
Yeah, like Baron, he's an inspirational teacher. My handstands were going nowhere for a long time, and then I had workshops with Cameron, and now my handstands are going somewhere because he really inspired me. My motivation didn't come out of desperation. I don't need to do a handstand. My motivation came out of inspiration because Cameron was just lighting a fire of interest and enthusiasm and that element of the practice.
Awesome. Right, Hamish, is there anything else that you would like to add about the training that you'll be leading next year before we wind up?
I'd just like to say it's going to be a great deal of fun. There's some wonderful people already enrolled in the program, some people that I know, some people that I don't know. You're going to meet some great people. You're going to immerse in some great yoga. This journey into power practice that Baron has taught me and that I'm seeking to teach others is a wonderful way to strengthen your body, to mobilize your body, to get in touch with your breathing, to come into your power. That's why we call the practice, the training, step into your power. You will feel empowered by this process, and I can't wait to get involved in it. It's going to be exciting.
Awesome. Hamish, thank you so much for sharing of your wisdom and your knowledge and your time with the Yoga Lunchbox audience.
Thank you.